Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I'm here today with episode 294 of Weekly Poker Hand, and we have a doozy today. So let's get right to it. Before we do get started though, if you're enjoying my videos, click like, click subscribe, leave a review wherever you're watching this. That goes a long way to helping other people find me, so please do that. We are playing 5, 10, 25 at Best Bet Jacksonville, and we have a raise from pocket nines from Peter to 125 bucks. A 5 big blind raise, that's, fine. I typically raise a little bit smaller to like 3 big blinds or 4 big blinds, but whatever. Ben elects to call with a 7-5 of hearts, and now George picks up a real hand in the small blind with pocket kings and quickly 3 bets to $600, which I think is a nice size. Notice we are playing very deep stacked with about 200 big blind effective stacks, slightly more, I suppose, given Ben and George have more. But we're effectively 200 big blinds deep. Peter and George are going to be the main players involved in this hand. And with these stack sizes, when you do 3-bet to 600 with a hand like pocket kings, you're already cutting down the implied odds of the under pairs pretty nicely. So I like this. I think this is a fine 3-bet size. Now, should Peter call? Well, he has to put in $475 into a pot that's going to go up to, it's probably going to go 3 ways, into $1,500 or to $1,800 pot. I think you should. You don't love it, but what else are you going to do? This is a situation where set mining does make logical sense. If you make a set, you will stack your opponent sometimes. Now, it's important to realize you can't just say, oh, I'm going to stack my opponent every time I make a set, because what if George has ace queen here and the flop comes 9-8-7? Obviously, you're not going to stack him. So do not think you just have maximum implied odds. Don't get too optimistic. But this is a situation where nines can profitably call. Now, Ben has 7-5 of hearts. Closing the action, he is going to be in position throughout the hand. I think this is probably a fold. Ben is $6,400 deep, and George covers them. For 475 more, 7-5 of hearts is going to be in pretty bad shape. You're going to be against some combination of like big cards and overpairs. And that means that if you do get a 1-pair hand, it's often not good. So you're really just trying to get flushes and straights and 2 pairs, and that's not going to happen all that often. So I get the idea that 7-5 of hearts is usually not going to be dominated, but at the same time, the pairs are usually not live at all. So I think you just need to fold out the 7-5 of hearts. Also, I would have just folded it to the initial pre-flop raise, because when you get 3-bet like this, it's a pretty nasty spot to be in. But Ben splashes around, which I'm not a huge fan of. And we see a 3-way flop with $1,800 in the pot. Flop comes Jack 9-8, giving George an overpair, Peter a set, and Ben a double gut shot straight draw. So everybody has a little something. So let's talk about this scenario. When you 3-bet the pocket kings and 2 players call, you have to start thinking they have some combination of big cards and pairs. Now, the big cards kind of missed here, but if you think about the logical big cards when you have pocket kings, the logical big cards are ace queen, which is going to fold any bet, and it's in bad shape anyway. You probably not a whole lot of hands with a king because you have 2 kings, right? So now we're looking at hands like queen jack, queen 10, which you lose to, jack 10, which has loads of equity, jack 9, which you lose to, 10-9, which has loads of equity, 9-8, which you lose to. So you're not actually doing great against the various big cards. Also, if you think of the pairs that your opponents could have, well, queens is not going to fold, but jacks beats you, 10s has a lot of equity, 9s and 8s beat you, 7s is going to fold. So when you do bet here and get action, you actually have to be very cautious with the kings. And I'm actually not convinced you even need to bet. I think that checking in this scenario is perfectly fine, because if you have kings in the small blind and you check, and then one player bets and another player calls, or one player bets and another player raises, you can actually just fold immediately. I remember a hand I played in a World Poker Tour tournament where I think, how did it go down? It went raise, call, call, call. I 3-bet with aces out of position. Everybody called me. And the flop came something like this. I think it was something like 9-8-5. And I just checked and folded when it went bet call. Because, what are they betting and calling with on 9-8-5? They must have something decent. Turns out they both had sets, and I sidestepped losing a bunch of money. And this is actually a very similar spot. We're not quite as multi-way, but this is a scenario where if you do get it all in with kings, you're going to be against some combination of sets, 2 pairs, and very good draws. And you're in bad shape against all of that. So let's see what George does. What a lot of people do in this spot is they just blast it. They'll bet $2,000 or $1,500 into the $1,800 pot. And when they do that, they get crushed. Anyway, here, the pocket kings does check, and I like that. Peter makes a bet of $1,200, 2/3 pot, which I think is fine. And then the 7-5 of hearts just like quickly mucks. And I actually don't know if you need to quickly muck the 7-5 of hearts here. You have to presume that whenever George checks the flop, he probably doesn't have too many nut hands. So if he doesn't have too many nut hands, it means he's going to have a lot of marginal hands that are either going to fold or maybe call. So that means you get to see the turn very, very frequently. The problem with this double gut shot, though, is that if a 10 comes, you lose to any random queen, and it's somewhat likely that Peter has a queen, like queen jack or maybe queen 10 already himself. So for that reason, I do think it's fine to fold the 7-5 of hearts here, but this really kind of illustrates why you don't want to be playing these hands. When you flop a double gut shot, sometimes it is one like this, and you don't even get to play the hand, which is a bit of a bummer. So now, back around to George. What do you do with pocket kings now? And I think the right play is probably to call, because if you go all in, Peter, the flop better, is going to call off very, very well, right? If he has pair plus draw, he's getting, he's roughly 50-50 against everything, and he's not going to fold. And if he has a set or two pair, he's never going to fold. And if he does have a hand like ace jack or king jack or queen jack, maybe not queen jack, but if he has ace jack, I think he's probably going to at least strongly consider folding to a jam, because like, what do you really check jamming here on this board? So I think if you shove, the flop better is going to play relatively well. And if the flop better is going to play relatively well, you'd much rather call and keep them in to the point that they think a hand like ace jack is good. Or if they do have a hand like ace 10, maybe they'll keep bluffing it on the turn. Also, you kind of know which turns are bad for you, right? If the turn is a 7 or a 10 or a queen, those are all particularly bad. And on the turns that are particularly bad, you can just check fold. And on the turns that are safe, like 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, the obviously safe ones, you can then check, let him bet again, which meant you keep him in with all of his bluffs and his overvalued hands like ace jack, and then you can easily call it off. So that's how I would approach this hand. I think when you jam, it really does force the flop better to play well. So I think that's the play in this scenario. I think a lot of people get overly focused on the idea that pocket kings or an overpair is normally a good hand. But whenever the action goes down like this, on this board, in a multi-way pot, in a spot where the board just really nails the pre-flop raise and then caller's hands, you have to be very cautious. And turns out George does just check shove all in. And pocket nines beats him into the pot. Obviously, you're not folding sets. And I think it's just an overplayed overpair. And it turns out overpairs are often very overplayed. And when you are playing deep stacked, these are some of the more difficult hands to play, because when a lot of money goes in, you're often not loving it. And you have to be cautious in these scenarios. Because right here, look, 200 big blinds went into this pot, right? In a scenario where I think when 200 big blinds goes all in, most of the time the kings are going to be in pretty bad shape. So running it twice, it is no help, and the pocket nines scoop a very, very nice pot. So that's going to be it for this episode of Weekly Poker Hand. Thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Jonathan Little. And if you want to learn more from me, head over to my training site, pokercoaching.com. There you can get a completely free trial membership and check it out. If you don't like it, don't sign up. But we have lots of students having lots of success, and I'm confident that if you spend time working on your poker skills, you'll have lots of success too. So check it out at pokercoaching.com. Good luck in your games, and I'll talk to you next week.